Matagorda Island, Texas. Dan Randolph stood at the broad window of his office, staring grimly at the hangar floor below. A pair of technicians was bringing in a twisted bit of wreckage from the truck parked outside in the hot summer sunshine, carrying it as tenderly as if it were the body of a fallen comrade. Part of the wing, it looked like, although it was so blackened and deformed that it was tough to be sure. The sleek outline of the spaceplane's original shape was laid out across the hangar floor in heavy white tape. As the chunks of wreckage came in from the field, the technicians and crash investigators from the FAA and the National Transportation Safety Board laid them out in their proper places. Once they get all the pieces in place, Dan muttered, they'll start the autopsy. Saito Yamagata stood beside Randolph, his hands clasped behind his back, his head bowed in sympathy. Might as well do an autopsy on me, too, said Dan. I'm as good as dead. Daniel, you are much too young to be so bitter, said Yamagata. Dan Randolph gave his former boss a sour look. I've earned the right, he said. Yamagata forced a smile. No matter what, he almost always smiled. Founder and head of a young but vigorously growing Japanese aerospace corporation, Yamagata had much to smile about. He wore a Savile Row three-piece suit of sky blue with a tiny pin in the jacket's lapel. A flying crane, the family emblem. His dark hair, combed straight back from his broad forehead, was just beginning to show a touch of gray at the temples. He was the tallest member of his family within living memory, at 5'11", more than an inch taller than Randolph. Once Yamagata had been as slim as a samurai's blade, but the recent years of living well had begun to round out his belly and soften the lines of his face. His eyes, though, were still probing, penetrating, shrewd. Dan was in his shirt sleeves, and they were rolled up above his elbows. A solidly built middleweight, he had a pugnacious look to him, in part because his nose had been broken a few years earlier in a brawl with a trio of Japanese workmen. When he smiled, though, women found his rough-hewn face handsome, and he could be charming when he had to be. He felt far from charming now. His gray eyes, which had often sparkled as if he were secretly amused at the world's follies, were sad now, bleak, almost defeated. The space plane had been his dream. He had bet everything he had on it, everything he could beg or borrow. His company, Astro Manufacturing Corporation, was going to show the world how private enterprise could make money in space. Now that dream lay twisted and broken on the hangar floor below. Dan saw a small, slight figure off in the far corner of the hangar. Jerry Adair, the company's backup pilot, slim and spare. From this distance he looked like a sandy-haired, freckle-faced kid. Adair was staring silently at the wreckage being deposited on the floor. He had often clowned around with Hannah Ahrens. She had been the serious one, he the exuberant, playful joker. He wasn't clowning now. He simply stood there like a forlorn teenager as the technicians brought in the blackened, twisted pieces of what had been a machine he might have piloted.